Hi guys, so in this video I just want to talk about what's due next week. Before I get into that, I want to remind you how important it is to make sure that when you are trying to get your work done, and I understand you want to do a good job and that sometimes you're short on time, it is not a good idea to skip the content and go straight to the assignment, because when you do that, you start missing important pieces of information, and basically you don't do a very good job on your assignments. And I can tell it's because you haven't actually completed the lesson. It would sort of be like not ever showing up for your classes and then trying to do all the assignments for it. And you might have some success with some of the assignments, but other ones you're going to really miss the mark. So for the assignment that was due yesterday, it's really important that you actually read through the content, that you clicked on all the links, that you read your required readings. Otherwise you wouldn't have been able to do the assignment that was due last night. Now, moving on to what's due for next week. So I wrote a whole long post for Monday, obviously, where I explained everything, but you're really focusing in this unit on applying literary criticism to a variety of different texts. So some of you may have been relieved to find out that although you are studying Hamlet in this unit, you're just doing the one scene. That's it. And I love Hamlet, by the way, but we decided that when we were writing this course that there's nothing in the curriculum document that says you have to study Shakespeare at all. But we did think that it was important to touch on some of the key issues in Hamlet, just so that if you do go on and study literature, you have that grounding. Okay. But that's it. Like, we're done with Hamlet now after this week. So I'm just laughing because I'm just starting Hamlet with my face-to-face class, and we'll be doing a lot more than just the one scene. But you guys are doing some pretty heavy stuff with each of these pieces. So you are going to have the scene from Hamlet, you're going to have some poetry next week, and then the week after that you're going to have some prose. And for each of those, we are asking you to analyze the text using multiple literary theories, and you're also required to do some pretty heavy secondary reading and responding to those secondary readings. So for example, this week you had 2 essays to choose from for reading about Hamlet. So in the content, after you read through the play at the end, and it has the required reading where you have to imagine you're the director, how would you stage this, and so on. And yes, I know the one video doesn't work, but it doesn't matter because the second video did work. It says, next you will choose to read one of 2 essays on Hamlet. So you didn't need to read both of them, although it's a good idea to read both of them. The first essay was looking at Hamlet from an archetypal perspective, and the second essay was looking at Hamlet from a feminist perspective, and you could have chosen either one of those. And then when you went to the assignment page, you had to submit your graphic organizer where you were analyzing Hamlet from a few different perspectives, and then you had to complete these questions for whichever essay you chose. Okay, so that was what was due last night. Now, next week, again, you're going to be working on activity 2, which is poetry. And the very first discussion that you have to do is really super easy. I just want you to actually think about poetry and what poetry is, okay? And then I've got links to a bunch of different literary devices for you to review. If you are not totally comfortable with literary devices, make sure you review them because you're going to be required to touch on them. And then I have a poem by Jeanette Armstrong. And please do pay attention when it asks you to read the poem first silently to yourself and focus on identifying the speaker and the subject matter. Actually do that. Then I asked you to read through it a second time, and I want you to read it out loud. And that's because I want you to hear what the poem sounds like. So obviously I don't expect you to do that in a room full of people because, people might worry about you. But do it on your own. Just say it out loud and listen to what it sounds like, and pay attention to the punctuation and how the punctuation and line breaks affect the way that you read it. And then I've got a link so you can learn about the author of the poem, which might be helpful. Then I have a second poem by Margaret Atwood where I actually provide you with a sample analysis of the poem, okay? And then I give you a whole bunch of different things to talk about when you do an analysis of the poem. And then there's also a video that shows you how to analyze a poem. So there's lots of resources there for you. When you click on the assignment page, you're going to see the first assignment was that discussion about poetry and what it is. Okay, so you do that. And then you've got the 2-column note. And so there is an example of what the 2-column note should look like. I did it for Margaret Atwood's This Is a Photograph of Me. You're going to do it for the history lesson, but base it on what I wrote for the Margaret Atwood one. And use the guidelines that I gave you in the content page in terms of what you should be talking about when you look at the poem. Okay, and then assignment 3, you're going to apply literary theory to a poem. So it's exactly the same graphic organizer, except remember, after you submit it to the discussion, I want you to identify similarities and differences between your interpretation and the interpretation of your peers. And then I want you to identify the theory that you think provided you with the most insight. So please don't forget about that. It's not just about posting your graphic organizer. The second part about comparing similarities and differences and deciding which theory gave you the most insight is really important. That's what I really want you to focus on. And when I say most insight, it's like, okay, probably doing This Is a Photograph of Me, I might get more out of it if I applied reader response or perhaps feminist literary theory, or maybe even postmodern, although I'm not asking you guys to do postmodern. But just as a hint, and this is kind of a bonus for those of you who actually watch this video, you're probably going to get a lot more out of This Is a Photo, or out of the Jeanette Armstrong poem if you apply post-colonial literary theory. Okay, just a subtle hint. Okay, and I think that's it for now. I've addressed everything that's due for next week. Please do not leave it to the last minute or you are really going to struggle with this. Bye, guys.